Welcome to the Contact Center Gurus, the podcast for contact center and customer experience leaders. Learn best practices, new technology, tips and tricks, and more. Listen in.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Contact Center Gurus. I'm your co-host, Jessica Voss.
And I'm your co-host, Rob Enslow.
All right. Yeah, and today we have special guests, Owen McGrath and Vince Lynch from IV.AI. So Owen, tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So yeah, Owen McGrath, I'm the head of sales for the US at IV.AI. A bit about my background, I've spent about 12 years in technology doing sales and business development, a little bit of time doing product as well. My career started actually in the ad tech and digital advertising spaces, but recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, pivoted over to first to the telephony telco space, working for SignalWire, and then was there that I started working with different contact center providers and got my exposure into the contact center space, and then found IV.AI through a partnership, and then joined Vince earlier this year. And I'm just really excited to be in the AI space now.
Awesome. And now, Vince, tell us about yourself. So I know we're going to be talking about intro to artificial intelligence in the contact center, but we would love to, learn a little bit about you first.
Sure. There's so much to know.
Yes.
It's kind
you were born this high.
I was only a tiny little egg. Vince, I'm the CEO of IV.AI. I been in this space for about 8 or 9 years. Used to be really hard, and getting people to think about AI and the value that could be created through automation was kind of like talking gibberish to people. They would just look at you blankly and be like, what planet are you coming from? And then fortunately that all kind of flipped about 5 years ago, and launched IV.AI at that point with my co-founder, John Martin. And we basically, we just got together all the smartest people that we knew in the space, and we built which is essentially an NLP platform. It's very kind of foundation. So NLP stands for natural language processing, and it's this kind of whole space of AI that's around making sense of language information. And it's kind of, people talk about NLU, natural language understanding, NLP. In my mind, it's kind of all the same thing. Natural language processing.
Acronyms, machine learning, AI. I mean,
yeah, exactly. So like the whole of the kind of AI space that we focus on is this kind of making sense of language part. So that's kind of been always the thing that really appealed to me. Before I got into AI, I was a creative director, and I managed writers and teams of writers and producers. And one of the things that was really, really tricky was trying to make sense of an idea. Like, how do you make sense of this information that you're trying to communicate out to someone? And then also, how do you make sense of how they're responding to that information that you're communicating with them? And it really used to bug me, because we'd have these large teams building inside of these big media companies, and we would be, driving a lot of the value that was created by the media company, and in reality kind of didn't get enough of the love, kind of, in my opinion. It was because you couldn't really distill the value that was being created. And then when I first ran into AI in 2009 in the production environment, I was blown away by how that was completely changed, and how you could now take an idea, take a concept, take words, and look at them through a lens of science, so that you can actually get to the root of the value that is in the words or in the language. And again, like I was saying, kind of at first it was really hard to communicate the value of that, but then now it's become a lot easier, and we get to work with some of the large companies in the world, from kind of Disney to Walmart to Samsung to Toyota, globally with a lot of businesses. working with teams that have kind of really small internal tech teams, where they have kind of maybe one technical person internally or very few, all the way up to Netflix and Facebook, where they have large internal AI teams and need an NLP specialist for problems they're working on that are very specific to making sense of language. And that's kind of never been more realized than what we've seen in the contact center world, because you just have all of this data with language data. So whether it's someone calling in on the phone, calling into an IVR, speaking to an agent, what the agent's saying back to the customer, what's coming in on email, going back to the customer by email, social media, chat, whatever channel it is happening on, wherever this kind of conversation is happening, is this amazing data source for businesses. And the smart businesses are realizing that and are running with the baton to basically try to, is it a baton or a baton? What is the thing that you
I call it baton.
Baton.
It's a baton? Okay, because I imagine
like a relay race, right?
Yeah, but then I can imagine like people throwing the baton and like twirling it and stuff. I don't know.
Oh wait, yeah. So I have a ton of questions.
Okay.
Because I've been in the contact center world 20 plus years, and I am seeing a lot of hype around AI. And like we talked about earlier, has kind of a lot of nicknames: NLP, machine learning, and so on, automation. So I kind of see AI right now is where cloud infrastructure or SaaS platforms were maybe 6 to 8 years ago, where customers were kind of learning about cloud, getting, dipping their toes in the water to see where it could work, how it could work, if it's secure. Because I started selling cloud before it was cool and before it was called cloud. And I remember a lot of customers were just, still adamant about keeping their servers on-prem and making sure it's the most secure. But now, and it could be COVID was a big driver, a big push into the lake, was, getting everything up in the cloud now, and private cloud and infrastructure, that's it. So I'm seeing a lot of that. I don't know, are you seeing that too, Rob or Owen, where AI is right now?
Yeah, it's funny you mention it, because I think one of the things we've hit this sort of inflection point where every company, and I think this was very much true probably 6 or 8 years ago, cloud is just a standard now, but everybody needed to say, like, we have a cloud offering. Like every CCaaS provider is saying, yes, we have AI. Yes, and every email automation platform, any sort of technology company has some sort of AI offering because they feel like they need it. But people are now just really grasping their hands around, like, what exactly is an AI strategy when the rubber meets the road of, like, where are they going to apply AI into their contact center? So for example, Vince talked a lot about understanding ideas. And so a lot of the AI that we do is on the analytics space, which is just helping people understand what exactly is being talked about in the contact center, using things like anomaly detection to understand, like, to surface, hey, something's blowing up. There's an issue with a product. There was an issue with the rollout, or something's happening in the world, a natural disaster that's causing this, and being able to see those events as they happen. And then, of course, all of the automation that we know kind of to be a lot about AI, about, whether that be a smart IVR or something like that, that's getting much more effective and not just annoying people that are, people are also getting more comfortable talking to a smart IVR because that it's actually an intelligent thing and they're not just yelling at some bot that doesn't understand them. So I think it's a good analogy, because at the same time, there's a lot of people that have really dug in and they say, no, we're not ready for AI. We don't need it. People, you see decision makers all the time. They say, I don't like talking to a robot, therefore no AI in my contact center. And people have those sort of emotional attachments to that, but maybe that's not quite the reality of their whole customer base, but that's how certain people feel. And people will have those same ideas, to make that analogy with saying, oh, the cloud is not secure or something like that, which maybe is maybe not quite founded, but people have those emotional reactions there.
Definitely. And I think, I don't know that it's as valuable as as people realize, because it's almost like the internet, right? And information is valuable, assembled and executed in the right way. So that elegant execution of AI and the demonstration of that is what really is, and the results that follow, I think are what's paramount. And I think we're getting so many, I think call centers are getting so many messages from AI providers these days. They don't know which one to look at and which one to believe and which one might work for them. It's kind of like the internet and all the information there.
Yeah, I have a quick question on that, since we're in an intro to AI class. So like Rob mentioned, AI is everywhere, and I kind of feel like customers are a little bit overwhelmed. What would you recommend to a client that has not adopted AI in any aspect of their environment on where to start? There's always a baby step number one. Can you kind of walk us through that, or what would you guys suggest to a client?
Sure, yeah, I can take that one. It's important to walk backwards from the contact center strategy generally. So if the contact center's core goal is cost savings, then you want to think, okay, well, how do we introduce as much automation as possible to try and reduce cost? And if it's cost savings plus NPS CSAT score together, then it's like, okay, how do we increase automation and how do we make sure we're retaining that NPS score or growing it? And then if it's just strictly NPS, then it's a different way of thinking about it entirely, where you're just thinking about kind of quality and kind of how are the agents currently performing and how can we make them perform better, and how can we give tool sets to the contact center managers to be able to really make sense of what's wrong with their contact center as it relates to their customer success metrics. So it's kind of, that's the very starting place, so that you can marry the need of the business with the value that AI can bring. I think often people think of AI as a big investment, a cost investment, and in reality it shouldn't be, because it's sitting alongside a really high cost structure that can usually fund a lot of what an AI can do, because you're currently outsourcing a lot of it to BPO or wherever it's kind of going, and you have a high attrition. So instead of just kind of hiring people up just to lose them again 3-6 months later, how can you be using AI to be thinking about it differently? And also, how do you starting with your core need, and then moving that towards how do we approach that in this new world where AI can be a partner for us? I think that's the most important piece. And then it's really kind of kicking the tires in relation to the company that you're working with. Once you kind of are out and looking for a vendor, how long have they been in the AI space? This is not an easy thing. It's not like software or building an app or kind of building a website where you just kind of learn to code and you can build it and there's nuances to it, but it's kind of, it's more of a time investment to learn how to do something, versus AI, where you have to be training an AI, you have to put it in the live environment, you have to see how it performs, you have to be able to measure how it performs, you have to be able to watch out for things that can be doing that are not what you want them to be doing. You have to have systems in place to make sure that doesn't happen, because obviously you have a thing, if it's automation, it's acting on your behalf. And even if it's analytics, it's something that's really important, because the AI is giving you data that you're using as a foundational piece to make business decisions on top of. So if it's kind of helping you understand what's going on with a certain sector of your business and FAQs related to the customers for that sector of your business, and you're trying to figure out how to better convert your NPS score for this certain type of challenge that your customer has. If the AI isn't produced properly and it's not trained to know what it needs to know to be able to give you that insight, you're then working with amplified bias. The problem that the AI is servicing is seen as like this real truth. And then if you're building on top of that without a validation step, you end up building on something that's broken to begin with. So it creates even worse, like a bigger problem than you would have otherwise. So it's an important thing to get right, starting with the foundation of what you need from a business perspective, and then really figuring out how do we ensure that the AI that we're deploying is going to be able to connect with what we need and be validated as we go through it, and has in the AI space what's called a confusion matrix, which is basically, is the AI confused? What is it confused by? And how can we understand how confused it is, or how smart it is in relation to the problem it's solving? And these are kind of fundamental things when it comes to machine learning and AI, but there are things that often companies where they're kind of reselling another kind of AI solution under their kind of brand, or they won't be able to do because they don't have access to the actual AI themselves. So it's kind of a really important step. And I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, that was very thorough.
Thorough,
Love
nice.
it.
I love thorough.
Yeah, it's
Just
so
to maybe just distill one point that Vince had said is,
Just distill.
I think, make sure that, if you're trying to dip your toe into AI, make sure you're engaging with a partner that's really taking the time to understand how your business operates and understand your customer journey. And I think what Vince was getting at is that, AI isn't, at least today, isn't in this really off the shelf type of product where you plug it in the way you'd plug in a CRM or the way you'd plug in a cloud compute solution. And it takes some custom understanding, some tailored understanding of what the customer service problem is that we're solving. And also some customization of the AI models themselves. And that's really a good place to start, is make sure that people are not just saying, hey, we're just going to implement this thing like it's just off the shelf, but that they're really going to roll up their sleeves and understand and work with you as a partner. I
love that. Now, when you look at AI in the contact center, what gets you guys the most excited? So, but before you answer that, I like to give my own testimonial. So I hate data entry. I hate going here, typing things in and moving to different tools when I just want to be talking to people or relationship building with people, customers, suppliers, anyone. And I look at data entry like I look at laundry at home. It's so boring, it's constant, and I hate it. So I love, automation tools that, kind of make my work life easier and help me with, data entry or, putting information into different systems and make them talk to each other. So that's what gets me excited about AI, but I would love to hear your guys' perspective. And that's my own personal one, your perspective in the contact center though.
I think that's a big part of it in the contact center. That data collection, the data copying from one place to another, the complexities that are added with that when you have multiple people, multiple agents entering data into a CRM tool, into contact center software, and everybody thinks about it differently in creates the customer record differently. That is, not only is it annoying for everyone who's doing the work and it's very kind of robotic, it's also highly likely to have a bunch of the human bias that's associated with the way they think about the problem that they're looking at versus kind of a centralized way of looking at that problem. So that's a massive piece, is like, how do you extract all the information from what the agents are engaging with the customer is saying, with what's coming in through the email, coming through chat, as it relates to the number of times the customer comes in, specifically what the customer is saying, not just like how we think about that based on our knowledge base, but based on what the customer is actually saying. Because in reality, there's so many nuances to it, and
so many.
the customer confusion, and like that thing that would be helpful for a person to have from like the data entry perspective is imperative in a contact center with the kind of cost associated with doing that from person to person. And it also burns out your agents because they're sitting there doing this mundane task over and over again when they really should just be there connecting with the human they're talking to and trying to better engage with them, because they're that's what they're good at and that's what they're there to do anyway. So it's kind of, I think that's it, to me, is a huge green space in the contact center world. And it's, again, kind of speaking to that initial point of kind of the strategy, or like how you can think of an AI strategy as it relates to your core business. Being able to look at all those different workflows, from like data entry to kind of knowledge base management to kind of managing your funnel when you have peak times, and how do you staff up for those things if you need to staff up, or can automation play a role in relation to helping with these peaks and troughs, to kind of retention of your agents in making sure that they're staying on because they're able to just focus on the work that's to hand, and they're able to find the knowledge that they need more quickly, and they're able to then spend the rest of the time not kind of thinking about how am I searching for this information and finding what I need to find, and think about the human they're speaking to like focus more on connection. I think those things to me are really exciting, and I think generally the contact center is the most exciting place inside of large businesses because of the way they think about it. Because people think a contact center is a cost structure. They think it's an operational problem they have to solve. And in reality, it's not at all. It's the heart of the business. And it's the place where they have the most information about their company generally, where it's the most true and most first party as well. So it's I think the dynamic that's really exciting is that the contact center managers and the people that are working on the operations side, or whatever side it sits on, whether it's marketing, operations, whatever it is, or finance, still these teams are hopefully going to be more empowered by using the technology to help them prove that they are the kind of this really important insight for the business, and that it shouldn't be thought of as a thing that is kind of the last thing they think about after product and the rest of the business, and it becomes closer to the front because it is so important to understand what's happening with the lifeblood of the company.
Awesome.
It's so cool, because if you think like, how often, you look at how often are marketing teams having huge budgets to be spending for market research, to be like, we need to understand our customers, we need to understand our consumers, and we need to understand the market. And they're ignoring the fact that the contact center is this source of all that very data that they have, and they're sitting on it. It's all in these recorded files in their, contact center, and they're just not even looking there. And that, through NLP and AI, that we can extract those insights for them.
Yeah. And Rob, what kind of excites you the most about AI in the contact center?
Yeah, I would say lead generation, marketing automation, sales development has excited me the most. And I think it's just because, growing up in an entry-level position, being in sales development, it's unbelievable how rigorous and emotionally taxing it's on a person. You can't do that forever. You just can't. And so if you're able to have train a bot to do it, they never have a bad call. They never have a bad day. They don't get emotional.
Oh, they can. They can.
Let's not get into emotion yet. There'll be an entire podcast on emotion in AI, which is an awesome space, but yeah.
So Vince, what KPIs or maybe business outcomes can be positively impacted by a really good implemented AI strategy? Maybe like the top two.
That's a good point. I really love what Rob was just saying about how it can enable a sales team, because I think like the essence of it enabling a sales team or enabling a customer service team is kind of really the same thing when it comes to AI. And it's kind of there are things that the AI can do really well, and so hopefully this couples with your question about KPIs, Jessica. Mm-hmm. So like, with Toyota is a great example where you have kind of people that are selling cars, they're sitting in a dealership, and they need leads coming in. And people have certain questions about a car before they buy it. And in order for them to be able to be converting based on, say, a media spend, so media spend, get them into the sales funnel, they're now engaging with us in sales funnel. They're speaking to a salesperson. If they go in and they're having that first conversation with the salesperson, they already know a lot about the car and what they're buying and their questions about it and what they like about the car and what color they want and how much they're willing to spend and how price conscious they are and what car they had previously. All these things that are important to understanding who that person is and how to convert them through a sales funnel. That stuff can be done really well through an AI. And we've built AIs for that problem and converted like 26x better on the media spend.
Oh, I would love that myself, because one thing I hate is going to car dealerships and spending 2 hours there.
Exactly.
So anytime I could automate those 2 hours of my time, I'm in.
Right, totally. It's a big purchase. You want to research
Yeah.
and do your work, but you also don't want to spend 2 hours in a dealership getting attacked by salespeople. And it's like that kind of lead up time, as you think about it in relation to a KPI, is really interesting. So you're spending all this money on media to get someone in the door for the salesperson to pick it up, and you can do a conversion there. We spend X amount of money on media, $1. What does it convert when we have the same media spend, same salespeople, and an AI in there? What's that conversion rate look like? And you do an apples to apples comparison, and it's drastic. It's just extraordinary, because the AI is able to help the customer feel better informed. It's able to understand what the customer actually wants, so that the salesperson is informed when they're engaging with that customer. And it's entering it into a CRM tool in a structured way, so that it's always the same every time. So the salesperson shows up, they've got a sheet, the sheet says exactly what's important, and then they can go into the sale and get into the nitty gritty with the person who's potentially purchasing. And that's on the sales side. Same thing on the contact center side, where you have cost structure associated with managing things with humans, and time it takes to spend with the humans, and the queue in relation to how the wait time for customers. All of those metrics can be enabled through AI. So you can say, we want to reduce the amount of time it takes our agents to move through this funnel with the customer once they get involved. And it can just be like, we're going to try to shorten it by 3 minutes. So we go from 8 to 5, and then we drastically increase our coverage time for the agents and how much they're able to do in a day, and reduce costs. But thinking about it that way in relation to time spent, because we know the human has to be there, but does the human need to be spending that much time to solve the problem?
I whenever I have to call a customer service to get help, I know what happens. And when I'm waiting on the agent to help me because they're fumbling through tools, I have empathy for the agent because it's not their fault, but inside me, I'm like, oh my gosh, come on, someone help the agent, get that AI in there. They can't find the information, like they're not well equipped. And me being in the contact center world, like I know, so I'm never like angry at the agent, but people get so frustrated with the agent and they think it's like the agent's fault or they're incompetent. And it's really the tools that are given to them. So I'm a big proponent of empowering that agent.
Exactly. And, Jessica's told me time and time again, the first time I heard it, I didn't really believe her, but it's research behind said that 75% of new sales, come from, your support team, and really working with, like you said, it's kind of an indirect sales. So sales with existing clients. Okay. So I think as soon as your company reaches a certain size, I think this is completely feasible. In fact, I know it's possible. I was thinking about it, and there's a BPO right in my yard here that reported to me completely 100% inbound. And they have an entire floor dedicated to Visa, and they processed $2.5 billion inbound existing clients, okay, back in 2014, I think it was. Unbelievable. And so I was just thinking about that, and they didn't even have AI really back then that they were employing. What could they do with AI? It made me think. I guess so Owen, I guess what departments within any business, I guess, have you seen AI have the most influence in? And we've already touched on it a little bit, but how long do you think contact centers have been successful using AI as well?
So how long? That's a great question. I think some of the best have been really successful with AI for 5 years, maybe even a bit more. Others are just tipping the toe in the water now, and others are still just trying to wrap their heads around it. There's also plenty of other folks who have tried AI and have been unsuccessful. We're still in relatively early stages, but there are some standouts that I would say have been up there for 5 years. Other departments, I read an amazing case study. It was really cool, but a marketing department. It was Dixon's Car Phone, so a retailer in the UK. They're like a Best Buy, or like a Target, like an electronics retailer. But they used AI just to refine all of their marketing copy. And so they had humans at the end of the day writing the different product descriptions and the promotional copy, but they used AI to optimize for it. And it was through that AI that they were able to just iterate and iterate so much faster on that. And it delivered overwhelmingly positive results. And that's just a great example of where, like, you still have humans at the center. You still have humans coming up with these creative ideas, but it's just where you used to be able to experiment with only so many that your brain could handle and that people could sort of manage the analytics on. The AI supercharges that. And that was really effective. So marketing, I think, is sort of the next beyond the contact center, where the use case is really clear, where that becomes incredibly exciting. And then from there, it's product development, because it's all of that feedback from your consumers of how are people feeling about these products, thinking really carefully, like, what are any issues? Are there unforeseen issues coming up? Like, those are going to hit the contact center really quickly. So those are the other departments, I think, where you want to think about that as well.
So this one's for you, Vince. How do you think AI solutions have evolved? And is there ever going to be kind of this, absolute, just this
take over like Terminator? I'm just kidding.
This peak, where it just kind of levels off and we can't progress anymore.
Yeah,
it's a good question. I think that we're kind of at that stage right now when we're really focused on a given business. So kind of we can get to the stage where we kind of refine it as much as we possibly can. And we've been doing this for, a good example is like 2016, we were building for Aeromexico Spanish automation of customer service for the airline. Obviously, airlines are so noisy and changing live environment all the time, like really hard problem. And we got them to 96% automation through Facebook Messenger in 2016, going into 2017, which was just had never been done before, like that level of automation through one channel. So when we did it, Facebook heard about it and they freaked out. They announced it at F8 that year because it's just such a high automation score through their channel, obviously. That was 5 years ago or something. So we've been at this level for a long time, but we've been in space for longer before that as well. So like we have the experience going into it, but you kind of get to a really high level in a given channel, and then you won't basically be able to get much further. So you get to like 96% automation, high 90s, maybe like mid 90s. And then you basically, there's human error that comes involved with the customer being really confused, not being able to explain what they want, so you can't automate them. Or there's a change in the way that people communicate about a certain idea that changes it. So there's always going to be kind of 4 or 5%, sometimes less, maybe like 2%, where you won't be able to fully get there from an AI perspective. But when you're hyper focused on a channel, you can get as good as you're going to get for that problem. And then the next thing is like, so now we can automate it that well, and we can save that cost associated with that channel. What now? So now we can learn from it, right? So we can say, okay, well, how does that apply to SMS? Or how does that apply to email? Or how does that apply to our IVR? So how can we take those things, go with IVR? We're never going to get to 96% automation with an automated voice. People, they're just there to speak to a human. They've already waited in the queue. They're angry. They just want us to talk to a human. So, but you can take that learning, reduce the amount of time the agent's spending on the phone, or automate 30-40% of the calls that are coming in because you're dropping them into SMS from IVR. So you're constantly kind of crafting away, but you're going kind of channel to channel to channel. So it's kind of, if you're like, hopefully to answer your question, kind of like when it comes to the general overall contact center, AI kind of crushing it across every channel, across the business, across any language, any country. Those things are going to be, I think, are there now. Like for certain companies, we're able to get there and within a few years have a really sophisticated AI engaging for the company across all their channels, across the different lines of businesses, and then going from customer service to marketing, et cetera, and kind of building through sales, et cetera. But it takes that level of focus to be able to get there. And then it's about kind of really focusing on the channel It's like SEO, search engine optimization. Someone types in the question they have. Ideally, they get it in Google before they even come into the contact center, right? And that's a huge problem because you need to not only understand the way that the data that Google gives you from the search, but also it takes forever for them to update. So you make the change on your website, it's 2-3 weeks before it hits the SEO update for search, and then maybe you can see that you've made it a little bit better. But that kind of like constant crafting is like a moving organism.
I have a quick follow-up question to that, if you don't mind. So this is a best practice question. Have you seen it more efficacy in implementing a Facebook Messenger link on a website or chat? Because you gave the Facebook Messenger example, automating that, which has been more effective, would you say?
Facebook Messenger, like a Facebook widget on for Messenger on a website works really well when someone is deep in the ecosystem of using Messenger. So if someone is like, they love using Messenger, they're messaging with their friends all the time, they're messaging business through Messenger, and they're like, they see that little logo, they're like, oh, amazing, I can click that and I can be in this conversation. Those convert really well versus standard chat. And I think that's due to the fact that you have branding there where the person's used to getting answers through that channel, and the fact that they know what they're going to get there versus when they click the chat button and they get an email fill out form. So just like in filling out their email address, and there's no one to speak to there anyway, which they're used to getting from multiple websites to take that approach, which is this kind of which is basically like an email template that they're used to seeing, and is really annoying when you're there and you're trying to solve the problem in the live environment. So Facebook Messenger says, this is live, like this is something I'm probably going to be able to do right away. It's also really beneficial from a tracking perspective because you have a conversation open with them if they jump into that channel. So you can reach out if you don't solve the problem for them, and you can have a human reach out to them maybe later if the AI can't do it. So you have that openness in the channel in the same way that you have with SMS, which is so beautiful, where you have that kind of, you're in it with them. So there's lots of factors for doing it if you can do it. It's free. Whereas with SMS, sometimes, there's a small cost associated with that. And then also now with the ecosystem, the way they open it up with with Instagram, that's kind of a massive opportunity because you're able to reach out to the customer across more channels where they're spending their time. And the way that their kind of Facebook strategy around making sense of that whole ecosystem through one kind of back-end channel is pretty amazing when you think about the number of touch points you can have with the customer across a place where they're likely already on the app. Is pretty much ubiquitous. I don't know how many people don't have Facebook or WhatsApp or Instagram. I think it's probably quite a small group.
I stopped using Facebook 10 years ago. No, but I'm on the gram.
Exactly. So you're in there.
Me too.
They've got you pegged. No WhatsApp as well? No?
They got me. Okay.
You're
so I
not
have
on
a question.
No.
So what are some of the overhyped AI solutions that get pitched? So I'm hearing, RPA, IVA, conversational AI. There's AI agent assistant. There's a AI for sales, AI lawn care, AI pool service, minus the last two. But what do you think are the overhyped ones?
I don't know what you think, Owen. I think
or are there any? Maybe there's not. Maybe we need AI everywhere in our life.
I'm not close enough to like the hype cycle or like that to really know like what the market, what's like being pitched a lot in the market. I think there's some things that don't make, some things that are cost prohibitive and therefore are kind of tricky, such as like emotional voice analytics. So like, I want to know the emotion of the person based on the sounds they're making with their voice, and the way the pitch changes will help me understand how they're feeling as they're going through an engagement so that I can better service them. That's awesome, obviously, and it's super impressive. But but it's costly because you have to constantly be processing the voice with very high frequency. So it's not cheap to do just from a server perspective alone, just from a management of the data perspective. So there's a baseline cost that's high for all the companies that are selling that, even the ones that are just doing it exclusively. So therefore, it's a tricky thing to implement.
But also, like, how accurate. Like, sometimes I'm so hyped because I'm passionate and I talk passionately that they may think something's wrong. Or sometimes, maybe I'm tired that day, but I'm talking lower, but I'm still, fine and happy. It's just that state of mind that I am. So I'm not sure how accurate that is at all, too.
Yeah, exactly. I think like emotion is a thing, is one of the things that it's very doable now. The question is, how do you connect it into something that's meaningful, that you can say, well, I did this thing and it was really obviously helpful and we showed this great KPI result, because there is no real emotion tracking yet, where it's like, we need to make sure we get more joy out of our customers, and that's going to be our KPI, right? Which it should be. In the future, we want to lower disgust. We want to reduce disgust, and that's where it will go. Like 5 years from now, hopefully, that's the way people think about it, because that is.
Stay tuned on that, by the way.
What's that?
Yeah. Stay tuned on that, by the way. We have a vendor that does that.
We do that too. Like that's a thing that we can do right now. Like, we're with the vaccine hesitancy, we're tracking how do people feel about the vaccine, and what is their emotional state as it relates to the vaccine, which is important when it comes to like a healthcare system nudging a human to try to go get the vaccine or not get the vaccine, based on the fact that it is there's a lot of emotional the emotional trigger is really what is driving the decision making, because it's an emotional decision, because it's your health and your body. So it's like, so we have these amazing models of making sense of disgust and making sense of joy, etc. But they are hard to convey the value of to a person working in a contact center who is thinking about sentiment, happy, sad. So it's like, do you want happy joy? Do you want happy elated? Do you want disgust? Do you care about anger? Do you like, it just adds a lot of complexity right now, where I think that it's too soon for a lot of businesses. And this is certainly like, I'm coming at it with a lot of shrapnel in my body, because in 2012 I built an AI company with friends called Dumbstruck, and it was basically you watch a video and you're in a research environment, and it records your reaction to what you're watching and tells you your emotion as it relates to the video. It looks at disgust, looks at joy based on your face and how your face moves. And it's like incredibly powerful. And this is like 2012, 2013. And we were taking this to market going like, you guys are going to freaking love this. Like movie studios, like you can tell the emotion of how a person is responding to a trailer. And that was, how long ago is that? That's 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and they're still going, and the business is doing well. But it's like even still, after all that time, with all that opportunity, in all that the way that you would consider how valuable that would be, that is still not ubiquitous for people that are building video ads. So it's like, when you think about emotion for the contact center, and you like the question of froth cycle and like where we are in relation to hype versus kind of reality. That's why I think of emotion as being kind of very kind of something that can be overhyped, because it's freaking awesome and it seems really logical. Yeah. But I've been through the wars, and it's hard to convert the value of emotion.
Yeah, it's something. It's also whether you're doing it at a macro level or on an individual level. When we think about the contact center, a lot of this is what we need to solve for is at the individual level. It's an individual customer, it's an individual agent. It's making sure that we're coaching that, and we're making sure that we're getting them through. Whether we're coaching the agent or helping the customer get to the outcome they need. Which is very different than saying, okay, here's how we tailor messaging to get the most people in a society to get vaccinated. And that those are sort of different applications. And so, yeah, you can, if you're doing sort of, to Vince's example, trying to evaluate people's emotions based on their facial expressions at a macro level to understand how a trailer is working. Okay, that's one thing. But for example, there was this insurance company called Lemonade that was saying that they were going to advertise that they were going to see if you were lying on an insurance claim based on your facial expressions. So before we even think about the idea of bias and how people's faces are different and how have we trained these facial recognition technologies, we're now looking at an individual, not a macro level of saying these people are generally happier. We're saying, is this person lying or not? and that, directly, correlates to their claim. Are you saying they're committing fraud or something like that? And that's really dangerous at this particular juncture. So, what could be ready at the macro level might not be ready at the individual level.
The interesting is, sorry,
go ahead, Vince.
No, I was just going to say, Owen, that was interesting as well in relation to that work that you were looking at from a regulation perspective, and how that's kind of changing, because Lemonade didn't they get in a lot of trouble for that as well, because they actually couldn't do it in reality. They were just using it as like a marketing stunt versus reality.
Yeah, they got in a lot of trouble, and regulation. There's broad scale regulation coming to the European Union, and the Federal Trade Commission did alert the public that regulation is coming to the United States as well, encouraging people to sort of take control of it now, and reminding people that all those anti-discrimination laws still exist, and if they apply to an agent in the call center, they certainly apply to any AI that you've deployed as well, about fair access to credit and things like that.
I think the other bit of it, what was interesting as well, is that they're forcing you to back up the claim that you are using AI. So if you say you're using AI, then you have to prove it, which I think is really a really good regulation if that does happen, so that you can't go around kind of saying you're doing something that you're not, which is an important step.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that. I remember there was an app for doing expenses. I won't say which one, where you would upload and scan your receipts, and it said, it was like, hey, this is a smart scanner. And you're looking at a receipt from a business dinner. So you're like looking, and so you write, in your chicken scratch handwriting, a 20% tip, tally it up. Maybe you've done the math wrong, scribble a signature, and then upload it with like a janky photo from your phone. And they're like, okay, this was so-and-so restaurant. And I remember somebody found on Craigslist the ad for the people to actually it wasn't image processing that was doing it was humans, but they made it look like they called it something more. And that sort of jazz hands of like, hey, this is automation, when really it's people in the backhand, in the background, pulling levers and twisting knobs. Yeah, we're moving away from that, at least as far as AI marketing goes.
So before we wrap up, I just have one final question. Vince or Owen, you can jump in. So when customers are selecting an AI vendor, one, what questions should they ask, or a few questions? And two, if they're new to AI, should they look at more off-the-shelf solutions, or would it be more effective for them to look at more customized solutions?
It's a really good question. From a vendor perspective, kind of kicking the tires, I think ask hard questions of them and the business. They should be able to explain to you exactly how they train their AI to do the things that they say it's going to do, and they should be able to talk you through the logic of that in a way that you can understand it, even as a non-technical person or a non-data scientist. The essence of what AI does is very much a human thing. It's really kind of, it learns, in the case of the contact center anyway, it's kind of learning from human data, and it is making sense of things that if you know the contact center and you understand what's happening in that ecosystem, you should be able to get into the weeds in relation to how the AI is doing the stuff it's doing, because you can do it with people. You can do it with 400 people in a room, and you can try to distill and work through problems and try to figure out how your business is going to be impacted that day. You should be able to do that with an AI and machine learning team as well. And if the team can't help you and explain that to you and give you that level of insight, then there's probably something weird there. So that's what I'd say from a kicking tires perspective. And then from a deployment perspective, as far as thinking about how sophisticated the team or the AI needs to be, I think it really depends on the businesses. I think it's a kind of a similar thing where you walk back from your business reality. So if your business reality is you have kind of a really small internal tech team, or maybe no tech team at all, and you're trying to figure out how do you deploy, you should knowing the objectives and the KPIs you're trying to achieve, figure out the vendor that can best support the needs based on the human capital you have internally. So if it's kind of, you don't have any tech people, some AI companies, like they're made just for data scientists. So that's like a data science team are the only people that can use it. Others are kind of very much more white glove, the way ours are, where we kind of, where we're there to hold hands all the way through the funnel. But there are different approaches. And again, I'm not super close to like how people are selling AI or what they're selling, because I don't really care. I just care what we're doing and how we do it. But that's I would say. Owen, did you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, if you could truncate that down into questions, what would they ask?
Maybe the top 3 questions, Owen, if you want to jump in.
Well, I really want to take your question and flip it around. And okay. I would say, make sure that the vendor that you're talking to is asking questions that are clearly showing that they're trying to understand your business and understand more than your business, but understand your customer journey. I mean, there's many different types of AI problems out there. So if you're a contact center for a retailer, the majority of the calls coming in are, where's my order? I want to return this. Can I get a different size? Can I get free shipping or something like that? Versus if you're an insurance company and you've got someone, saying like, why did my health insurance claim get denied? Like, that's a world of difference, and that those are very different problems. And make sure that the AI vendor that you're talking to is really digging in and understanding that problem and really conveying that, like, they understand not just from like an actual customer experience problem, but from an AI solutions problem, that they're really clearly understanding that and wrapping that around. So that's what I would say is.
So the question would ask, how do you establish, with your clients, what the customer journey, or what's your process for that? Anything else? I mean, that's one question.
Well, I think they answered it pretty well, Rob, and we have to wrap up for today. But maybe we'll do a second session with Vince and Owen.
Yeah, we definitely should.
In the next month or two, there's lots to talk about.
Yeah, because that evaluation process is much more complicated.
So let's do
spending a few minutes on. Yep.
Yeah. So I wanted to thank Owen and Vince for your time. And,
thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, and hope you all learned something.
Thank you. I certainly learned some stuff. How about you?
I sure did too. Yeah, I had awesome time. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed it. This is great, guys, and thank you so much. And it's love that you're doing this for the space. It's really cool.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Contact Center Gurus podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you next time.